All right, so Tony, I was just letting everybody know I forgot to record. So you've missed introductions. That's all we've done is introductions, and we will introduce ourselves again on Tuesday so everybody can be included. Um, so I'm just going to get started a little bit. Olivia, have you had an opportunity to kind of play around with Moodle? Emma, I know you're familiar with it, but
Yes, I went to Southeastern for my undergrad, so
okay.
pretty familiar.
So I will periodically post announcements, and announcements also will come to your email address. So you'll see things there. Sometimes I send things through email on Moodle. Always when communicating, make sure you always use your Southeastern email address and not a personal email address. That is like the school policy. So our textbooks are Days in the Lives of Counselors. I'll be honest with y'all. This was a rental at one time, and I did some changing of the textbooks, and I accidentally, I didn't mean to, I accidentally removed it from our rental list, and they couldn't get it back because it's not published anymore. So hopefully you all were able to purchase it on Amazon or some other website.
I purchased mine on Amazon.
Okay, and I hope it wasn't expensive. Okay, and then of course the other two are rentals, the Practical Ethics work text and also the Remley and Herlihy book. Fun fact about Dr. Remley, he was my dissertation chair. He works in New Orleans at the University of Holy Cross now. He was at UNO, University of New Orleans, for many years. And then when Katrina hit, he left UNO. He relocated to Virginia to be close to his mother, who was alive at the time, and he worked at Old Dominion University. And after his mother's passing, he was seeking ways to come back to the New Orleans area, and Holy Cross was just starting their doctoral program. So I was in the very first cohort of doctoral students at Holy Cross, and Dr. Remley came in my second year. And I feel very fortunate. He is not only a former school counselor, a former counselor, and a counselor educator, but he also has his Juris Doctorate. So he is very, very familiar with law as well as all things counselor. And Dr. Herlihy worked with him for a long time at UNO. She's moved out of state now. I can't remember where she is. But I think they're great. I love using their text. Hopefully it will be informative for you guys. So then I did just copy and paste from our syllabus the course schedule. So we're going to go over that when we go over the syllabus, and just important dates. These are the university policy statements. One of the things I need for you all to do is to go ahead you can do this after class, but validate the course syllabus and policy statements. It just means that you've received them. I did learn that it's a little bit different than it used to be. I think now you have to click through all of the policy statements before it will let you validate. So on the first page, those are all the most important things. Let's take a look at the syllabus. And y'all stop me anytime to ask questions if you have them. I didn't click hard enough. There we go. Okay. So we're going to be learning about legal, ethical, and professional issues this summer. I will tell y'all, Emma, you did start last semester. Summer session is pretty intense because it is all the same content that we do in a 15-week semester crammed into 8 weeks. So there's no less content, just less time, which can make it hard. So we'll meet in Whitehall in room 207, which is on the second floor of Whitehall. My office is 223C, which is across the hall from our classroom, and down the hall, I think, a little bit. That's my email address. Also, wendy.rock@selu.edu works, but the university is all about branding and they want us to put the formal official southeastern.edu on everything. And I will be on campus Monday through Thursday at 12:30 to 2 for office hours. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'll be carpooling with Dr. Williams. So I will surely not be there till 12:30 because I don't think she can get there earlier because she has a dog, Gummy, that she only wants to leave home for very short amounts of time. Otherwise, she has to board Gummy at the daycare. And on Mondays and Wednesdays, when I teach my school counseling class, I probably will get to campus earlier. I feel like I might as well just get there as early as I can and get as much work done while I'm in my office rather than hang out at home. So I'm less productive, I think, when I'm at home than when I'm on campus. But if you can't come and meet in person and you need to talk with me, I also have a link for virtual office hours. So when I'm in my office, I'll be available by Zoom, but also if the 12:30 to 2 doesn't work and you need to meet with me anytime, y'all, please feel free to just email me and let me know that you need to talk and we'll schedule an appointment that'll work for both of us. So we're going to review the current legal, ethical, and professional issues that are appropriate in whether it's an agency, a private practice, a school setting. We're going to talk about the history of the guidance and counseling profession. We'll talk about all the professional organizations that serve counselors and just kind of look at each of the tracks that are offered. Y'all didn't, I don't know if y'all mentioned that in your introductions. Olivia, I know Tony did, she's school counseling track, but Olivia and Emma, what track are you all?
I'm clinical mental health.
Okay.
Yes, clinical mental health currently.
All right. So certainly you're not locked in. If you have a change of heart, we can accommodate you. It's better to do it earlier in the program rather than later, but we'll talk a little bit about that a little later. So even though I do have my primary focus in my master's program was school counseling, I did take additional courses when I was in my program to make sure that I could become LPC eligible. And when I graduated from my master's program, I was offered a position in a psychiatric hospital. So I worked in mental health for a little over 2 years before going back into the school setting. Prior to my master's degree, I have my undergraduate degree is in education and I taught for a year. So I do have clinical mental health experience and I also supervise people for LPC. So this course is going to prepare you for making legal, ethical, and professional decisions and just to facilitate your professional development overall. I'm sure y'all are aware we are a CACREP accredited program. In fact, in the spring, we just went through our site visit and there were, I think, 2 areas that we needed to provide more information on. So I don't know what the status is right now. If anything, if we have, I mean, they were very, very, in our report, very glowing. So if there's anything that we need to address, they would probably give us like 2 years of accreditation instead of the full 8 and give us time to correct whatever those things are. It is, I don't think it's even possible that we would not be accredited. So in that vein, we have to meet certain standards. And in this course, there's really only well, actually there's kind of a lot of standards that we meet. But y'all can read those. I'm not going to read those to y'all. I have the textbooks listed, the course policy and valid policy statements. So for the assignments for this course, the first assignment is going to come up due on Tuesday. And it is a report that y'all are going to do of the various counseling associations, professional organizations. So you are going to visit 7 sites. So Emma and Olivia in particular, y'all will visit CACREP, the American Counseling Association, NBCC, which is the National Board for Certified Counselors, and the LPC board. And then in addition, you will select an additional professional organization based on your track. So probably Olivia and Emma, y'all would choose the American Mental Health Counselor Association, or AMCA. And Tony, you will look at the American School Counselor Association, ASCA. The third one is the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors. Then also everybody will visit the Louisiana Counseling Association website, plus 1 division. So there is the Louisiana Association of Counselor Educators and Supervisors, the Louisiana Association of Multicultural Counseling and Development, the Louisiana Association of Marriage and Family Counselors. LaCervic is a service and spiritual based organization. LCCA is the Louisiana College Counselors Association. LCDA is Louisiana Career Development Association. LAMCA is the Louisiana Mental Health Counselor Association. LASCA is the Louisiana School Counselor Association. And then I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I am not sure what LAAOC is. The Louisiana Association of, maybe it might be Addictions Counseling. Algebatic is the Association for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Intersex, and I don't know what the C stands for. The Louisiana Counselors of Social Justice, and then Provisional Licensed Counselors Association. So you'll just pick one of the divisions that's of interest to you and applies to you. So there are 7, that's 7 organizations overall that you're going to be reviewing. And I didn't give you the websites intentionally other than the CACREP website, because I want y'all to search for them. And you'll write just a little summary paragraph about the information that you found on each of the 7 sites. And in there include, what are the benefits to the members of the organizations? What are some of the activities that they offer? What are the services that they offer to members? And also just give kind of a general assessment of how accessible was the website? How easy was it for you to navigate? How easy was it for you to find? Maybe they don't have a website at all. Maybe they only have a Facebook page. So just talk about what you find in your search. So that'll be due on Tuesday. And then the next assignment is due the following week, June 14th, which is you're just going to look up an article in the library or on the internet. But if you use the internet, I highly recommend that you use Google Scholar, because your article should be an academic or scholarly article from a peer-reviewed journal. And you're just going to write your reaction to the article. Did you find it useful? What did you gain as a counseling student from reading it? And then summarize the content. So the article should focus on a professional issue specific to your track. So clinical mental health or school counseling. And then we'll talk about those in class. And then on June 23rd, you're going to look at a couple of different chapters in Days of the Lives of Counselors. So what I'm going to have y'all do is look at one chapter from each concentration or track. So I want y'all to read one chapter about school counseling, one chapter about marriage, couple, and family counseling, and one chapter about clinical mental health counseling. And I let y'all know what chapters to choose from. So with school, you'll pick just one from 15, 16, 19, or 20. For marriage, couple, and family, you'll pick either chapter 5 or chapter 8. And then for clinical mental health, you'll pick one of those chapters. And then after you read all 3, write just like a 2-page reaction or a 2-page report talking about how those each of those chapters kind of resonated with you. If the one that you identify with as your track, did that further confirm that it's the right choice for you? Did it give you second thoughts about your choice? One thing I'll say, Days of the Lives of Counselors are narratives written from different counselors, and they just talk about a day in their life in the profession. And so obviously one person isn't going to represent what the whole profession is like. So you might read one chapter from, for example, the clinical mental health and be like, ugh, that sounds terrible, but that doesn't mean that's the wrong track for you. So keep that in mind when you're writing that paper. Also, this is kind of a big one. This is, you're gonna find a practicing counselor who works in the field and matches your identified track. So for Tony, when you're watching this, if you have trouble finding a school counselor because it is summer, let me know, because I can help you identify someone who would be willing to sit down with you for an interview. Olivia and Emma, you'll just find someone who is in clinical mental health. If there's a particular thing that you're interested in within clinical mental health, maybe you're interested in DBT therapy, or maybe you're interested in Christian counseling or something along those lines, whatever your interest is, look for someone who kind of meets that. And then I have interview questions for you all to ask, but you can absolutely add additional interview questions. I would prefer that the interview be in person and not not over the phone or virtual. But if you're unable to meet with someone in person, if that doesn't work out, then virtual would be the backup. I definitely don't want it to be an email, because I want it to be a really organic conversation. And so you may ask the person a question, and then they might answer, and you might have something from their answer that you'd like to follow up on. And that's hard to do in just like a back and forth email. It's much easier to do in an in-person discussion. So then you'll write up a 2 to 3 reflection paper, 2 to 3 page reflection paper on what you learned in your interview. That will be due July 5th. Also, in terms of locating counselors, if you are seeing someone for your own personal counseling, I would ask that you not interview them. I don't think that would be appropriate. That's putting them in a dual relationship, which we'll talk about when we talk about ethics. But also, if you have trouble finding someone, maybe look at Psychology Today. That's kind of a good website where people advertise, and so you can find someone that's close to you. And then on July the 12th, you'll have an assignment where you will look at the ethical standards for the professional organization that most closely aligns with your program track. So AMCA for clinical mental health, ASCA for school counseling, and compare and contrast that with the ACA, American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, because in this class, we're going to be studying the ACA Code of Ethics as our primary code that we're looking at. It is the big overarching umbrella code of ethics for counselors, no matter what concentration they find themselves in. But the other professional organizations have their own professional ethical standards as well. NBCC has ethical standards, and AMCA does, and ASCA does. In fact, I happen to co-chair the ASCA Ethics Committee. And we just finished our revision to our ethical standards. They will be released July 1st. So Tony, for you, I will get to you the new ethical standards that go into effect July 1st. for the purpose of this assignment, you can compare and contrast those to the ACA Code of Ethics. And the last thing you'll do, kind of the signature assignment for this class, is a declaration statement. So when you register with the LPC board after you graduate and you are under supervision as a PLPC, which you have to do for a minimum of 2 years before you become fully licensed, you will have to submit a declaration statement to the board. So this is your first try at a declaration statement. And it'll be based on your future self and your future position as a counselor. And we'll review all of that long before it's due. I strongly encourage you all to join the Louisiana Counseling Association as part of your personal and professional development in the program. At this point, we can't require that you join it. You will be required by the time you get to practicum and internship, but it is highly recommended. Also, LCA has their conference coming up this fall it's either late September or early October. I don't have the dates memorized, but if you're able to go as a student, it's much cheaper. Student memberships are much cheaper than professional memberships. So they're less expensive right now. And attending the conference is a really great professional development opportunity. And which one of you likes to dance? Olivia, was that you? Oh, that was Emma. You're the dancer. So just FYI, they usually have like a reception with a DJ one night at the LCA conference, and Southeastern is known for having the largest number of graduate students that attend the conference, and the professors have been known to get out on the dance floor with the students and cut a rug or two. So it's a lot of fun. In addition to being a great professional development opportunity, it's both social and professional. So in addition, y'all will have a midterm and a final exam that will be part multiple choice and then part constructed response. So I like to give you all the multiple choice because it's good practice. At the end of this program, you're going to have 2 really big multiple choice tests to take. One is the comprehensive exam, the CPCE. And in order to graduate from the program, you have to pass that test. And it is all multiple choice. And then the other is the National Counselor's Exam, the NCE, which is not required for graduation, but it is required for licensure. And we offer you all the opportunity to take it as a student in your last semester. The same time you take the CPCE, it's really beneficial because then you're only really having to study a lot at once because the content is pretty much the same on the CPCE and the NCE. So to give you some practice, I do some multiple choice questions for the midterm and the final. The constructed response on the midterm exam will just be a couple of short answer questions. It'll probably be like 5 or 6 questions and you'll pick maybe 4 to answer. The final exam will include a case study and you'll have to go through the case study, but we'll practice some case studies along the way. So those are the assignments. Do y'all have any? That's a lot. Do y'all have any questions at this point?
So for the first assignment, I kind of tried to start on it. Do you want us to like label each paragraph?
You can. I don't have a real specific, I mean, let me see. I do generally expect you all to write in APA style format. So that would include a title page. You do not need a running head. In fact, if y'all, I'll show y'all, if you do APA style, there's a great website that will, if you don't have the APA style manual, this gives you all the guidelines. So, for instance, it'll tell you about what font sizes to use, headings, line spacings, the order of your pages. I mean, not all of it's going to apply to you because in an assignment like the first assignment, it's not going to, you're not going to have like a methods section. You're not writing up a manuscript. So a lot of it's not going to apply, but just general things like the line spacing and the font. And let me see if they have, yeah, title page set up. So it'll tell you in here for a student title page number, paper title, author, that's you. Affiliation would be Department of Health and Human Sciences, Southeastern Louisiana University, the course COUN 601, legal, professional, and legal, ethical, and professional issues. My name, and then the due date. So that's all you have to do for a title page, but that's a great website to get that information. I will tell y'all, I'm particular about grammar and spelling. I am not particular about, like, I think I say, what do I say in here? 2 to 4 pages. Honestly, if you write more, I'm not going to take, I'm not going to be a stickler for page length. I don't want to read 20 pages. Don't write me a novel. But you know, if you find you can't say everything you need to say in 4 pages, that's okay. You can go a little bit longer, but do try to follow APA style in terms of font. And so if you want to do headings, Emma, just do the headings using the APA style format for headings. Does that make sense?
Yes, and do we need a reference page too of the websites we used?
Yeah, I mean, you're okay. So for the reference page for this, citing web pages is a little bit complicated. What I would do is just on your reference page, just put the URL for each page that you use. Don't worry about doing that perfectly APA style. You'll learn how to do that when you take the research class. Any other questions about the assignments? All right. So just some course expectations. I do grade on a 10-point scale. I do think it's important, y'all are in graduate school, to be able to write at the graduate level. And a little self-disclosure, I really struggled with writing throughout my entire master's program. And in my program, we didn't have comprehensive exams. We had a thesis that we were required to write before we graduated. And I struggled through that. In fact, I paid someone to like help me with writing, and then thought I had a really good paper. And I was a teaching assistant. And so the professor that I was a TA for, I asked her if she would edit my paper at the very end. And she very kindly agreed. And then when I got it back from her, it was this was before there was like track changes and Microsoft Word. This was in 1993. Well, 95. I graduated in 95. She gave me this hard copy with red marks on every page all over. I cried for days because I thought I had written a really good paper. I paid someone to help me with my writing to get better at it. And so needless to say, I did take advantage of all the resources that I had, and I still struggled. I didn't really get proficient at writing as I should until I was in my doctoral program. But it is important in graduate school to be able to write well. And it's important as a counselor to be able to write well. You'll write notes, case notes that you'll submit to insurance companies, and you'll need to be able to write well. So if that is an area that you struggle with, then we do have a writing center on campus. I think it's I'm not sure where it is. I think it used to be in D. Vickers, but then I think D. Vickers might have gotten messed up by Ida. So I don't know where the writing center is right now, but you can probably search it on the website. I know that they have a writing center and they'll do editing for you. And of course, any written assignment is due at the beginning of class, the day it's due. With late papers, I accept them, but take off 10% each day up to 3 days late, and then I don't take them after 3 days. Now, I will tell you all that life happens and I get that. So I am a stickler for this only when you don't talk to me. I'm a stickler for this when you tell me after the fact, or you're turning in the paper late and you haven't communicated with me. If there's something going on and you're feeling like you're not going to be able to get an assignment in on time, all you have to do is talk with me in advance. Like, just, Dr. Rock, can I get an extension? I've got some, you don't even have to tell me what it is. Just, I'm dealing with some personal things right now. And I don't think I can get the paper in. And I'll probably ask you, like, reasonably, when do you think you can get it turned in, and agree to let you turn it in late. So for me, it's all about communication. The only time I'm going to, like I said, be a real stickler on this policy is if you haven't communicated anything with me and you're just late. Of course, the expectation is for you to do your reading assignments before class so that you can be prepared in class to discuss them. You're responsible for the reading materials that are on the syllabus and assigned. Even if we don't discuss them in class, they could be questions on the midterm or the final. And any questions that you have, like when you're reading through the textbook, anything you don't understand, of course, like, write that down, write the question, bring it to class, and ask anything that you need clarification on. And if there's a reading assignment that I don't have listed on the course schedule, then we'll talk about it in class, or I'll post it in the announcements, or both. You are expected to attend all classes. If you miss class, then you have to account for that time missed, that 2 hours and 45 minutes. And so in order to make up for the class time, there's an alternate assignment, which would be 3 professional peer-reviewed journal articles that pertain to the topic that we discussed in class. And then you just submit to me a 1-page summary on each of the articles. There's Moose Shoe. I don't know if y'all heard squawking in the background. So that assignment, if you miss class, that assignment is due when you return to class. And if you don't turn in those article summaries, then it's a 25-point deduction from your final course total. Practice professional behavior, of course. This just means that while we're in class, you shouldn't need any electronic devices. You don't need to be on your phone. You don't need a laptop. It's really going to be very discussion-based when we're in class. So if you need your phone, like, sometimes I'll keep my phone by me, or my phone on, because I'm worried about my mom. And so if there's something going on in your life, Olivia, you're the one that has a 9-month-old, right? Like, or almost 10-month-old. You might be worried about the daycare or the sitter. Like, just let me know. Like, if I, receive a call, I'm going to step out because, it could be about my daughter. Just let me know ahead of time.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
So there shouldn't be texting during class, or talking, or online surfing, or shopping. That's a lot harder to pull off in a class with only 3 people anyway, because it'll be pretty obvious if y'all are sitting on your phone texting. I think students can get away with more of that in larger classes, but it really hasn't been a terrible problem for me, and I will address it if I notice it. Social media, the idea is for our class to be a really safe space to discuss issues related to our profession. And so the rule of confidentiality applies in our course. What we say in class is to stay in class, and not something that you would take out and talk with other people about. And certainly don't go post it on social media. That has happened in the program in the past. It was before I came into the program, so prior to 2017. I know that the faculty have talked about a student who was in practicum or internship and shared, not identifying information, but a situation with a client that they were seeing on social media. And we're not following you guys on social media. We are on social media. but we're not friends with the students on social media, but a lot of times what will happen is someone will bring something to our attention if it's a concern. And so the rule, of course, is don't post anything about class or about anything about clients or anything like that on social media. Moodle is used for posting documents, links, announcements, assignments. You should check Moodle regularly. As far as contacting me, I do usually reply to emails within 24 hours. Not a guarantee, but I'm pretty quick on emails. Last semester was probably my worst in terms of being quick or timely. I don't know. Last semester was hard. I don't know if you guys felt that. If y'all, well, Olivia, I don't know if you were in school last semester, but no. Emma, for you, I don't know if you felt that, but for me, I don't know. I don't know if it's like post Ida and COVID and everything is just like, I was not myself. So hopefully I'm getting back on track and we'll respond quickly to emails. As far as, I know, Emma, you said you have a hearing aid, right?
Yes, yeah, I have the hearing aid and I've always had extra time, so I will get that sheet for you to sign. I'll probably have it ready Tuesday, so.
Perfect. And Olivia and Tony, same thing. Like if you all are a qualified student with a disability, all you have to do is just bring me, you have to self-identify with, oh, look at me. I need to change this. It's the Office of Accessibility Services now. And it is in Tinsley Hall. It is not in the student union anymore. So I already see that I need to change that in my syllabus. So it is not the Office of Disability Services. It is the Office of Accessibility Services. For our course schedule today, we're just introductions, syllabus review. We'll define counseling, and if we have time to jump in a little bit about suicide, we will. Everything I tell y'all about suicide and Louisiana mental health law, y'all are not going to remember by the time y'all are at the end of this program, but I am going to show you all where to locate information that will be helpful. On Tuesday, your course assignment 1 is due. You'll have your first reading assignment due, chapters 1 and 2, and we'll get a little bit into some professional orientation and ethics, legal issues, history, etc. I'm not going to go over day by day what we're going to do, but what I do want to go over with you all is, so this came about last semester, sort of unexpectedly, but my daughter got a wild hair and decided that she wanted to be an au pair in France this summer. So she went on a website called aupair.com and found a host family. And she is going to be in Montfarville, France, which is in the Normandy region of France, for 2 months this summer. So my husband and I and our son are taking her to France because I would like to meet the family that she's going to be with, because it's a little bit scary leaving my soon to be 21-year-old daughter with strangers for 2 months. So we are leaving on June 10th to fly to Paris. And we're actually going to spend 4 days in Paris and then drive to Montfarville and stay 3 nights there. So on the 14th and the 16th, I will not be here. I'll be out of town. So you'll have field assignments. The field assignment for the 16th is a day set aside for you to do your interview with a counselor. You don't have to do the interview with the counselor that day. That is just the day that is set aside for that field assignment. That assignment is not due until, let me see. That assignment is due July 5th. So, while I have set aside June 16th for you all to interview somebody, the assignment is not due to July 5th, and you can do the interview anytime that fits into your schedule. But in talking, in planning this out and talking with Dr. Ganduzzi, who's our department chair, you know, I want to make sure, first of all, that you all are getting everything that you need in the course, but also that I'm following whatever policies and procedures are required by the university. So on the 14th, our class will be on Moodle. I will have a discussion board. I will have a case study for you guys. I might ask for you all, the three of you all, maybe to meet through Google Meet and just kind of talk through this case study, and then maybe just write up a reflection on the process and decisions that y'all made, something along those lines. And what we'll do is those articles will be due, the journal article review, and we'll do that through discussion board on Moodle. And I'll be honest with y'all too, like when I go to France, I am bringing my laptop, but I don't anticipate having a whole lot of time to really sit and respond and do schoolwork. What I will do is, and this is, what is the word? This is not according to protocol for the university, but in case something comes up, I'll give y'all my cell phone number and y'all can use like the WhatsApp, I think, app to contact me if something comes up and you have a question. That'll probably be the easiest way to get in touch with me, as opposed to email or something. Although I'll be able to check email on my phone, I guess. I don't know. I've never been to Europe before. This is my first time, so I have no idea what to expect. Other than I have totally like planned out from the moment we arrive until the moment we leave with museums and the Eiffel Tower and river cruise on the Seine. So I will probably not be sane when I come back. So just be prepared. But I will be back on the 18th. So we'll have class on the 21st. I will probably be jet lagged, but I'll probably be muddling through like I am today. But we'll get through. The midterm will be on June 28th. So there's one other day, or maybe two other days for you guys that I will not be in Louisiana. I am presenting at the American School Counseling Association conference in Austin. So I actually leave on Thursday the 7th to head to Austin, and I return on the 12th. So those two classes will also be on Moodle. Which ironically, and I kind of did this a little bit on purpose, but the topic on July 7th is technology and counseling. So we'll be using technology to talk about technology and counseling. So unfortunately, that's 4 days that I will not be in class. One thing that I think is an advantage for us is the fact that there is only 3 of you all. So I feel like we'll cover more content in a shorter amount of time because there's only 3 of you. So my goal is to make sure that y'all aren't missing anything. And then the knowledge base on our syllabi are just sources of additional information. This is not required reading by any means. It's just if it's something you're interested in, there are some additional resources there. There's the sexual harassment policy, the important dates for the summer session. This describes how to do your declaration statement. The LPC board website provides a sample declaration statement. They do that for PLPCs. So you can literally, I'm not telling you to copy it. I don't want you to copy it. I want you to personalize it and make it yours. But there are parts of it that you can use the whole thing as a template, I guess is what I'm saying. So you're not creating something from scratch in this assignment. You're going to follow the template or the design, and there is just one part that you are going to copy word for word, and that is the section on the code of conduct. But this goes through each component, and when you look at the sample declaration statement, you'll see that each component is listed or outlined here. And you're going to be making stuff up. It's going to be fictional. So have fun with it. You know, if you want your the name of your practice setting to be Hogwarts counseling practice, it can be Hogwarts counseling practice, or Scranton counseling, and you can be Michael, whatever his name is from The Office. Be as creative as you want. Mailing address and phone numbers, all of that. When you get to things like degrees earned, you will put MS, because that is what you will earn at Southeastern, a Master of Science degree. Institution attended, you will put Southeastern Louisiana University. So those parts, you're going to be as realistic as possible. You'll refer to yourself as a provisional licensed professional counselor, PLPC. This part will be fictional. Who's going to be your board approved supervisor? You'll talk about the counseling relationship from your perspective. This is going to be personalized to you, including general goals, whatever your area of focus is. This will be fictional, obviously, fee scales and procedures. I will tell you all that PLPCs cannot bill insurance. So you'll note that most PLPCs take cash payments. You'll talk about policies for missed appointments, how to schedule appointments, collection procedures, but the sample will provide you with examples of that. You'll explain the types of services that you offer, whatever your theoretical approach is, your modality, individual, group, family systems, and the age of clients that you see. We have mentioned code of conduct already. You'll talk about confidentiality, and when you have to breach confidentiality, you'll talk about privileged communication, what your clients are expected to do in an emergency situation, the client responsibilities. You'll talk about physical health, potential risks of counseling, because this is your informed consent document. And then you'll have a space to sign where you'll sign the declaration. Your supervisor needs to have a space to sign the declaration statement. And then if you are planning to see children under the age of 18, you'll need a space for parents to sign for their children. And then everything gets turned in on Moodle. I do have a scoring rubric so you can see exactly what I'm looking for. On the final exam case study, there's a scoring rubric, because you're going to go through a decision-making model. And then for all your assignments, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I have a scoring rubric. So you can see what I'm looking for. And that is everything on the syllabus. What questions do y'all have at this point? No questions? All right, I'm being thorough. So let's see, we'll jump into the content for today. We've done our intros, we've done our syllabus review. Let's talk about, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Let's talk about counseling. I want you to take just a minute and write down on a piece of paper your own personal definition of counseling. How would you define counseling? While y'all do that, I'm going to run and refill my water, and then I'll be right back. All right. Emma, you still need time?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And Olivia, you can unmute. Let's talk about what y'all came up with.
I said the act of two or more persons conversing about everyday life issues and giving each other their full attention and respect.
Oh, I like that. Olivia?
Okay, mine's long. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just word vomited all over this page. Okay. I might have gone to science. Okay, so I said utilizing a scientific approach / theory to engage with a client / clients in conversation, listening, and providing tools to navigate immediate or long-term past or present problems / fears / trauma / maladaptive behavior.
Nice. What were some commonalities that y'all heard between the two?
Discussing certain issues or problems with the client.
Listening.
Mhm. Yeah. Two or more people, both of y'all kind of said it could be two or more, and a conversation. Yeah. And it sounds like both of y'all kind of incorporated something about working towards some type of outcome or goal, or solving some type of problem, something similar to that. Good. So I'm going to share with you all. I'll go back to share screen. If we look at, I'm going to make this visible. Back in, shoot, I'm not going to remember what year it was, maybe 2000, I'm going to guess 2008 or 9. No, 2009, 10, around there maybe. The American Counseling Association brought all of the divisions together, all of the counseling divisions, to come up with a singular definition for counseling. I will tell you that they called it the 2020 A Vision for the Future of Counseling. So the delegates that attended comprised 31 different counseling organizations. Not everybody that was there agreed on the definition of counseling. I can tell y'all that the American School Counseling Association was one that didn't agree on this definition. But anyway, they came up with a definition of professional counseling is a professional relationship that empowers diverse individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. How close do you feel like that aligns with what you all were thinking?
I mean, it says like professional relationship, and I put like respect, which is sort of professional.
Yeah.
I think I forgot about the professional aspect. My bad. And career. Otherwise, goals as far as addressing certain problems, goals.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So that is the official definition of counseling according to the American Counseling Association, which is our overarching professional organization. And y'all have access to that. So hint, hint, that'll take you to the ACA website if you're looking for it. But I guess the next thing I want to do is just jump into a little bit about responding to suicide. And it's interesting and a little bit ironic that I always put this sort of in the first class and focus on this in our first meeting, because as co-chair, and actually starting August 1, I will be chair of the ASCA Ethics Committee. And it's kind of a rotating thing. So as co-chair, I've been working with the committee with school counselor protocol in terms of working with suicidal students, and how to assess for that. So I've been really diving deep into this work of suicide assessments professionally. And I had this as something to talk about on the first day of class before I ever became part of the ethics committee for ASCA. So just going to talk a little bit. This comes from a website, www.casespope.com/suicide. So all of this information is literally copied and pasted. So copyright warning. None of these words are mine. These are all directly from this website. But when you are working with a client, there are things that you need to know or be aware of to assess or just be aware of for potential suicidal ideation. And the same is true if they were to be a danger to someone else as well. But there are warning signs. So warning signs are going to be like behaviors that they're going to show that would indicate that they potentially could harm themselves or someone else. And then there are risk factors. Risk factors are more like environmental situations that put them in a, statistically speaking, more at risk for potentially being suicidal. And then there are protective factors. So protective factors are also environmental factors, but they are the things that are in place that provide strength and support and make them less likely to act on suicidal thoughts. So the first thing that is a very serious warning sign is a direct statement. So a direct statement or intention to, and I'm going to tell you all, like I said, I copied and pasted. Language has changed around suicide. We don't say commit suicide anymore. Do y'all want to venture a guess why they've gotten rid of the word commit suicide?
So the stigma with being committed into an institution.
Yeah, besides being committed into an institution, what else do we use the word commit? What do people commit?
Murder.
It's like they've already made up their mind that it's like an end all be all kind of thing.
Yeah, and also a lot of people associate commit a crime. Like it's got a very negative connotation when we use it in general. And so Olivia, you're absolutely right about the stigma piece. It's to reduce stigma. So now we say that someone died by suicide, somebody attempted suicide, somebody's thinking about suicide, but we really don't use the word commit. But it is in this presentation because, like I said, it's a copy and paste from a website and it is a little bit old. So if a person directly states an intention to die by suicide, that is one of the most useful single predictors. And we should always take those statements seriously. And yes, people do, when they're blowing off steam, say things like, I just want to blow my brains out. And it's impossible to know in that moment if that statement is just blowing off steam or if they are serious. And so we have to take it serious because the consequences are too dire if we don't. So also we have to resist the temptation to be dismissive and I heard this a lot from parents as a school counselor when I was working with a student who was considering suicide. And parents or teachers would say, oh, they're just seeking attention. Mm-hmm. And one of the stories I used to relay when I was in a training about suicide, I learned this. There was a young person who was seeking attention. They admitted it. And so they took a whole bunch of Tylenol, thinking that an over-the-counter medication is relatively safe, but they could say that they had overdosed and would get that attention. Unfortunately, acetaminophen is deadly in large doses. And it is not a quick death, and the person did die. And they died a very slow death as their organs were shutting down because of the overdose on acetaminophen. And so what I tell parents is, if this is seeking attention, then we need to pay attention, because to what lengths will they go to get that attention? We can't predict. And so we need to pay attention. Also, and I just did a training on this recently. You'll find as a counselor, especially when y'all enter practicum or internship and you're talking to a client, and you'll get sort of this, it's the only way I can describe it is like this tingly sensation. It's like this bug in your head. It's like the way that they're talking makes me think that maybe they're considering suicide. The best thing that you can do as a counselor is, in that moment, ask them directly, even though it is super, super scary. Even if this was a friend of yours and you're not in a counseling situation, if you have it in the back of your mind that, gosh, I wonder if they're thinking of hurting themselves, ask directly. And you don't want to beat around the bush. You don't want to say something like, are you thinking about going to sleep and never waking up? You know, you want to be very direct. Are you thinking about taking your life? Are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Be very, very direct. And the worst thing that can happen if you ask that question, well, the worst thing that could happen probably is that they'll say yes. That is truly the worst thing. But what counselors worry about is the person might say, what? No, I'm not thinking about that. That's not the worst thing that could happen, honestly. You ask the question and then they're like, no, I'm not thinking of suicide. Gosh, no, I wouldn't do that. That's one less thing you have to worry about. You've asked the question, they've answered it. So that's a good thing. The presence of a plan, according to research, increases the risk of suicide. The more specific, the more detailed, the more lethal and feasible, the greater the risk. So I can think of one student that I was working with one time, and she had the whole thing mapped out. She had a jump rope that was in the back of her closet. She was going to use it to hang herself. She was going to do it after, I don't know, somebody had left, but she knew who would come home next. Like, she knew which family member would find her. She had it very detailed. So the more detail, the more lethal. The number one lethal means of suicide is firearms. They are responsible for more than 50% of suicide deaths. Men are more likely to use firearms than women. The second most common method after firearms is suffocation, including hanging. That's probably in this presentation. Many suicides do follow a prior attempt. Somebody who eventually dies by suicide oftentimes has previously attempted. So that's a good question to ask your clients too, is, have you ever attempted suicide in the past? So we want to ask, are you considering suicide? We want to ask if they have a plan, what the plan is, and then have they ever attempted suicide? Sometimes people who are planning to end their life may communicate their intent indirectly, like they'll talk about going away, or they'll speculate on what death might be like, or they'll give away possessions, or they'll buy a gun. We have to pay attention to indirect statements as well as behavioral signs. This is probably no surprise, but people who are diagnosed with depression have higher rates of suicide than the general population. Also, primary affective disorder, 15% of individuals suffering from that disorder died by suicide. So treating depression can lower the risk of suicide. Hope is really important. People who feel hopeless are at greater risk for suicide. So as counselors, one of our jobs with our clients is to try to instill some hope. Substance abuse, I just reported on this too. I have more recent statistics than what's in here, but actually, let me see if I can share that slide on that presentation. I'm gonna have to find it this way. Mushu is on a tear right now. So this is about to share my screen. This is, y'all are getting a preview. This is a presentation I'm doing at the ASCA conference when I'm gone in July, but let's see. These statistics are interesting. So the dark blue states have the highest rates of suicide, and the light blue states have the lowest rates of suicide per capita. This shows suicide rates by age group from 2011 to 2020. And you can see like it ticked up a little bit for the, what age group is that?
18 to 24, I think.
Oh yeah. Is it 15 to 24? Yeah. Yep. And it ticked down a little bit in the 65 to 74 category. So, but generally speaking, has been an increase. It is the second leading, suicide is the second leading cause of death for individuals ages 10 to 34. It used to be the third leading cause of death in younger children, like the 10 to 24 age group, but it jumped up to the second leading cause of death. And then this just shows firearm. The yellow part of the circle is firearm deaths. The black part of the circle is suffocation deaths. The blue part is poisoning. And then the red part, I'm not sure. I guess it's all the others. But I thought I had in this one the drugs, but I don't think I do. I think that's in a different presentation. Let's see. Because that was a really interesting statistic. Let's see. ASCA. See if it's in here. Ignite. Yep. Somebody is knocking at my door. You're gonna have to wait a minute. Okay, it might be on this one. Let's see. Oh yeah, risk factors. Here we go. It's in my notes on this slide. So 22, this was from the CDC, 22% of deaths by suicide involved alcohol intoxication with a blood alcohol content at or above the legal limit. Opiates, including heroin and prescription painkillers, were present in 20% of suicide deaths, marijuana in 10.2%, cocaine in 4.6%, and amphetamines in 3.4%. So one of the reasons alcohol or drug misuse affects suicide rates, obviously, is because of the disinhibition that occurs when a person is intoxicated. So let me go back to our presentation. All right. Marital separation, this is distinct from divorce. For both males and females, separation created a greater risk of suicide, 4 times that higher than any other marital status. And this was interesting too. I did find as a school counselor that the risk went up for my students when they were breaking up from a relationship a lot of times. There's a lot of clinical syndromes that would cause someone to be at higher risk for suicide. Mood disorders are among those, organic brain syndrome, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a big one. There's a lot of research around that. See how old this is? This even uses the term retardation. We don't use that anymore either. Suicide rate for men is more than 3 times that for women. Women attempt more, but men complete more. And for youth, the rate is closer to 5 to 1. The rate of suicide attempts for women is 3 times that of men. So y'all saw the ages in that other slide that I had. This is outdated information at this point. One of those is all the way a reference all the way from 2001. In the United States, Caucasians, well, and again, this is so many outdated terms. We don't really use the term Caucasian anymore. I don't know if y'all are aware of that either, but it has some racist connotations because it was defining a hierarchy of people from the Caucasus Mountains. So white people tend to have one of the highest suicide rates, particularly white males. Indigenous people also have really high rates of suicide. African-American suicide rates have traditionally been lower than the white races. But again, Indigenous, Native American is greater than any other ethnic group. In Canada, the Nunavut Inuit suicide rate is 13 times that higher than the rate of the rest of Canada. Give me just a second, y'all. All right, sorry about that. All right.
I have a question.
Yep.
So you think that white people have a higher suicide rate because there's more of us? Like, you know?
That is actually that statistic is percentage wise in the population.
Oh.
So no, we actually die by suicide percentage wise more than the other populations. I think, let me see if I have that in the other presentation as well. I don't know. Let's see. That shows. It might have been on the website. Let's see. asfp.org. Are y'all seeing my screen right now, the Google page?
Mhm.
Okay. Why is it doing that? All right, and then The rate of suicide is highest in middle-aged white men. Here it is. So this is race, ethnicity, and gender. So at the very top, this brown line here is white males. And then the blue line is American Indian males. The green line is Black males. The red line is Asian Pacific Islander males. The black line is American Indian females. And then right below that is white females. And then the yellow line is Asian Pacific Islander females, and then Black females. And that is, when you look at it, so it's the rate of suicide per 100,000 people is how they calculate it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, the rate of suicide among Protestants is higher than those among Jewish and Catholic folks. The risk of suicide is reduced if someone is not living alone, so that's a protective factor. It's reduced even more if they're living with a spouse, and it's reduced even further if they are with children. Bereavement places survivors at an increased risk of suicide. 50% of those in one sample of a study who had died by suicide had lost their mothers within the past 3 years. 22% of suicides, compared with only 9% in the control group, had experienced the loss of fathers within the past 5 years. There's a link between childhood bereavement and suicide attempts in adult life. So bereavement is a factor, a risk factor. Unemployment tends to increase the risk for suicide. This is particularly true among men who are socialized to believe that they have to provide for the family. So that's problematic. Illness and somatic complaints are associated with increased suicidal risk, as are disturbances in patterns of sleeping and eating. One thing as a counselor that we always want to ask is if there's been any change. A change in sleeping, a change in eating habits, a change in interaction with people, like more withdrawn. So those are things to consider. People who have poor impulse control are at an increased risk for suicide. It's especially important to help our clients develop emotional regulation. Suicidal individuals will often display like all or nothing thinking, very rigid thinking. So like they might say something like, if I don't find a job by the end of the month, then the only alternative is to die by suicide. Stress. A lot of times too, these suicidal moments are very acute. They come up and they happen. And if we can get the person through the acute crisis, then they won't attempt suicide later. But an excessive number of undesirable events can be associated with an increased suicide risk. Women who experienced frequent unwanted touching had made suicidal gestures or attempts, compared with women, less of a risk of women with no experience of sexual assault. Ironically, when people are released from the hospital, they are at an increased risk. So you really have to have some safety plans in place to make sure that they are safe. And borderline personality disorder is a disorder that is associated with higher risk. Belonging is really important. So someone who feels like they lack that sense of belonging or feel personal isolation, they're more at risk. Y'all are going to have access to this presentation. So 10 steps to reduce suicidal risk. Screen all, and this says patients. We're going to talk more on Tuesday. We really don't say patients when we work with people, we work with clients. Counseling comes from the wellness model. So there's the medical model, which y'all will read about in the textbook, and there's the wellness model. And we really come from a wellness framework where wellness occurs along a continuum. With the medical model, it's like you're either well or you're not well. And when you're not well, they fix you and you get well. And then until you're not well again and you go back to get fixed. That's not how we do it in counseling. We see kind of wellness along a continuum, and we're always helping people become more optimally healthy. So this does come from a medical model, and it talks about patients instead of clients, but we would screen all of our clients during the initial contact and then throughout therapy. I mean, obviously, if you have a client who's coming to see you for maybe transition in job or stress, and they're clearly not suicidal, you're not going to ask them every single time they sit in front of you if they're considering suicide. But it is good, particularly if you have someone who has the risk factors and some warning signs, to check in with them regularly. Make sure that you check the literature, that you consult with experts, that you are consulting. And one really effective therapy right now that they've identified for working with clients who are experiencing suicidal thoughts is dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. It's very well suited for people who have borderline personality disorder and people who are suicidal. So you want to work with your client to arrange their environment so that they don't have access to whatever that they might use to try and attempt suicide. So this is something I would do with my students at Hahnville, is I would talk with them and their parents. Like if they were someone who was likely to try and cut their wrist with a razor blade, I would tell the parents, make sure that you have locked away all the razor blades. If there's someone who is likely to overdose on pills, make sure to lock away the pills. Even if there's someone who is prescribed a certain medication, maybe for anxiety or depression, then I would encourage the parents to distribute the dose once a day or whatever it is, and not let them have access to the medication on their own while they're in that suicidal crisis. And of course, firearms, making sure firearms are locked away and not accessible to a person who's experiencing a crisis. Make sure that you create an actively supportive environment as well. You want to make sure that that person has people that they can reach out to that for help, maybe some hotlines, whether that's a national or local hotline, that they have friends and family member that they can reach out to who can help them. As a therapist, I do not recommend that you give your phone number to clients and have them call you, because that can set you up for a liability situation. You've got family, you've got your own things going on in your life. And if a client tries to reach out to you because they're feeling suicidal and it's a moment when you can't answer the phone, and then they follow through and die by suicide, potentially could you be at risk because you were the person that they were supposed to reach out to and you didn't pick up the phone. You don't want to put yourself in that position. I tell school counselors this a lot. Some of them get frustrated, like don't make yourself accessible 24/7 to your students. So in schools following COVID, one thing that a lot of schools started using was this alert program called Go Guardian. Are y'all familiar with that, or have you heard of it? So what it will do, because schools were issuing Chromebooks, for example, to students. So every student had a device, because while they were on lockdown, they were able to then do school virtually. And what Go Guardian did was since this was a school issued device, it would monitor their use of the device. So any websites that they went on, I guess it would do keystrokes. It could pick up on keystrokes, so it would know what they were typing. And so anytime there were particular words that would send an alert. So suicide, for example, if a student was searching something about suicide, the school would get an alert, and then the school could act on that alert. And I've had counselors tell me that they like it, because one counselor, she said, yeah, on a Friday night, you know, I got the alert and I was able to call the mom, and the mom got the child to the hospital, and that saved the child's life. That's great. But what if Friday night at 11 o'clock, you hadn't gotten the alert? What if you'd been asleep? What if you'd been out to, you know, on vacation with your family? What if you had not been available and the alert fell through the crack and then the student didn't get that help? You could be held legally liable. So you want to really be cautious of that. You don't want to deny or minimize the problems of someone who has a desire to die, but recognize and work with their strengths and the desire to live. Almost everybody, if not everybody, who is struggling with suicidal ideation is ambivalent. There's a part of them that wants to die, but there's also a part of them that still wants to live, even when they're hopeless and things just seem, you know, like it can't get any better. You want to work on awareness of strengths and resilience and reasons to live and help them gain perspective. And be sure to, when you're communicating with them, that you are communicating realistic hope. You don't want to tell them all their problems are going to go away if the problems are not going to go away. I think it's important to be realistic with them, but also to help them find that hope. You want to explore any fantasies that they may have regarding suicide. So unrealistic beliefs about what that suicide may or may not accomplish can help them find reasons to stay alive. Maybe, you know, sometimes I'd have students that would say things like, you know, I just want to get even with my mom, I hate her, or I want to see who will come to my funeral. You know, things like that. You got to work through some of those fantasies. Make sure that the communication that you deliver is clear, and you want to make sure that you're avoiding any ambiguous or confusing messages that could cause harm. Well-meant and apparently clear messages can go awry in the stress of a crisis. So one woman who was convinced by her therapist that her children needed her, even though she believed herself worthless, decided that she'd just kill her children as well to spare them any agony of growing up without a mother. And she subsequently followed through with that plan. So be really careful about, you know, you don't want to tell a mom like your children couldn't live without you, because that could be, it sounds great in the moment, but could be misconstrued. Be sensitive to any negative reactions to the client's behavior. So, you know, I'd have students that would come see me, and sometimes they're exhausting. They're in your office every day when you're a school counselor, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days a week, and you get tired. And you want to be careful that you don't allow that potential for fatigue or for boredom or even negative countertransference to happen. You don't want to glance away or be drowsy or daydream or seem disinterested or seem frustrated. You want to really be present in the moment. And that can be hard and it can be stressful, particularly when you're working with highly suicidal clients. So you have to be really present in the moment and in tune with how you're feeling and what's going on with you in that moment, as well as with the client. And then of course, communicate care. So one of the quotes from this website was, I had a slasher my first year in the hospital. She kept cutting herself to ribbons with glass, with wire, anything she could get her hands on. Nobody could stop her. The nurses were angry. I didn't know what to do, but I was getting upset. So I went to the director and in my best Harvard Medical School manner began in a very intellectual way to describe the case. To my horror, I couldn't go on and I began to weep and I couldn't stop. And he said, I think if you showed the patient what you showed me, I think she'd know you care. So I did. I told her that I cared and it was distressing me and she stopped. And it was an important lesson. So communication of caring, willingness to listen, taking the client seriously. If the person is really trying to communicate how unhappy they are or their problems, then you can say, yes, I hear you. I recognize this is a really tough situation. All right, so that is it. What questions do y'all have about suicide, suicidal ideation, responding to suicide?
Are we gonna get into like what to legally do? Like when you think they're gonna commit suicide?
Yes, so that is next. Let's see. These are just some hospitalization rules and definitions. So a person who has a mental illness or a person who's suffering from substance or a related addictive disorder can be admitted and detained without their permission in a facility for observation, for diagnosis, and for treatment, but not more than 15 days under what's called an emergency certificate. These emergency certificates can only be signed by either an MD, a doctor, it's a PEC, a physician's emergency certificate, or the coroner, the CEC. Usually the physician's emergency certificate, they're shorter, they're like 72 hours, and the CEC is the 15 days. It's ironic because in the state of Louisiana, our coroners don't have to be medical practitioners, they're elected officials. So when they're not medical people, they need to appoint someone to do that job. Once that emergency certificate has expired, it is possible for a second emergency certificate to be written, but that's it. But that's in the most grave situations. It's really, really hard. When I was working, this is actually when I went from the psychiatric hospital and I was working in the school setting, and I had a student who was thinking of suicide. And when I called River Oaks to try to get them in for an assessment, the person I talked to basically said, like, we're not going to be able to keep them unless they pretty much have a knife to their throat or the gun to their head. Like they have to be in such a crisis that we think that they are about to attempt suicide. This is a link to just a form that the physician would sign in order to commit a patient. And again, this would be without their permission. In the case of a child, it's kind of scary because once a child is committed to the hospital, like they're there for 72 hours minimally, and the parents can't do anything about it. It's like the parents have to allow the idea is this is what's safest for the child, but that also can be very scary for the child and for the parents. So it's something to keep in mind when you're dealing with that. So under the provisions of this title, a person can demand a judicial hearing to see if probable cause exists for continued confinement. So that's if they've already been in for 15 days and they're being about to be committed for another 15 days. They do have the right to a hearing to try to get out of it. A judge can order them to stay if they're a danger to themselves or others. But it's so rare that that happens. When someone is admitted by emergency certificate, the director of the treatment facility has to notify the coroner of that parish. Within 72 hours of admission, then the person has to be independently examined by the coroner or their deputy. Again, because if the coroner doesn't have a medical license, then they find someone who does, who executes the emergency certificate to keep them for up to 15 days. If the coroner has made that initial examination and executed an emergency commitment certificate, and then a second exam is made by any physician, they can be confined for longer. Sometimes the coroner might decide they're not proper for emergency admission, and so then the person has to be allowed to leave. When they are admitted on an emergency certificate, they might receive medication and treatment without their consent, but they can't get a surgical procedure or electric shock therapy. This is all Louisiana law, and it varies from state to state. So with regard to the administration of medicine, if the patient objects to the medicine, the doctor is going to try to consult with another physician or a primary care provider outside of the facility for the client. And that treating physician will record in the patient's file the date and time of that consultation and any comments that were made. So this is where, when y'all are in the office counseling somebody and you think, oh my gosh, I think that they're a harm to themselves or others, what can you do about it? Particularly if they're an adult. It's not like you can call their parent to come take them if they're an adult. As a child, you can. But what you'll do is call usually law enforcement. It says a peace officer. They come and take custody of the person on what's called an order of protective custody, or an OPC. So then they're in the law enforcement custody, and the law enforcement will escort them to a hospital emergency room or to a treatment facility where they can be evaluated and have that PEC or CEC if they need that. I'm gonna just caution y'all though, the scary part about all of this is that law enforcement is not real well trained when it comes to mental health crises. So if you send, maybe you're working with someone virtually. So you're gonna send that peace officer or law enforcement officer to someone's house to respond to the crisis. And if they're not well trained, sometimes they can escalate situations. You know, the idea is that they should have de-escalation training, particularly when they're responding to mental health crises. But there's a lot of criticism that there's not enough training in law enforcement currently. And then also, if you take into consideration race as well, people of color are more likely to be detained and held by police. And it might be a very scary prospect for them to have police officers showing up at their doors in a mental health crisis. The sad thing is there's not much other option right now. That is the protocol in Louisiana. I think things need to change. But if you have someone in your office, or if you're working with someone who's in a mental health crisis, what you would do, you would break confidentiality, you would identify law enforcement, and they would take them in an order of protective custody into a facility. So then once the police officer or peace officer arrives at the treatment facility, then they turn over the custody to the physician or psychiatrist or whoever is going to be admitting that person. When it is a substance-related or addictive disorder and there is no treatment facility available, the peace officer or the EMT can use whatever means or facilities available to protect the health and safety of the person who is suffering from the addictive disorder. So this means that they potentially could jail the person to keep them safe. But no person shall be placed in protective custody more than 72 hours. That's the max. Especially someone who's being considered as an inmate for maintenance purposes only. So that's a little bit of what to do. Any questions? little bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of overwhelming. I like to hit it hard on the first day. It's not all that bad. So I'm going to make the assessing and responding to suicide is the PowerPoint that I showed y'all. And I think that was just recognizing, assessing and responding to suicidal risk. Did I say, oh no, this is a website. This is just general information for you guys. So if you want to further your knowledge and understand more, this would be a website you could check out. So it talks about evaluating suicidal risk, 22 factors, 10 steps to reduce risk, which I think I incorporated a lot of that in the PowerPoint. Yeah, look, this is the kspope.com website. So everything I did in that PowerPoint came from this website. So y'all have access both to the PowerPoint and to the website. This is a really interesting, this is the one that's supplementary for you guys. So this is from Syracuse University's School of Education, and these are some counseling modules. Again, this is more about just expanding and learning more. So they have common ethical issues, preparing for supervision, self-care, suicide risk termination, and violence prevention. So if you click on the suicide risk module, it goes into the ethical and legal aspects of suicide for counselors, the need to be knowledgeable and prepared, talks about risk factors and warning signs and protective factors, procedures for assessing suicide risk. So again, that's when you're assessing suicide risk, you're asking those questions like, do you have a plan? Have you ever attempted before? You're thinking about those risk factors and warning signs. There are assessments that you can use specifically to assess suicide risk, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Determination of risk and intervention is on here, prevention and postvention resources, school counselors responding to students at risk for suicide. I need to look at that more carefully since I'm working on this currently. They have some case studies and vignettes and some references and resources. So this is just for your extra information for you guys. Okay, so hospitalization definition and rules. That was what I just showed y'all. I'm going to make that visible for you guys in Moodle as well. This is a link to revised statute 28, which is, or Title 28 in revised statutes in Louisiana law. So this talks about all the behavioral health law. This is where you would find it. It gives this page gives definitions. This talks about the Office of Behavioral Health, where I'm going to show y'all that website. It's very lengthy, but I wanted y'all to know where to find behavioral health law in the state of Louisiana, and that's it. This is the order of protective custody law. So this is what it would take for someone to be taken into custody by police for mental health crisis. And that's under the Title 28 of the revised statutes as well. So this is the Louisiana Department of Health and Hospitals, or Department of Health's Office of Behavioral Health. So this is mental health services. And it gives information on acute units. So an acute unit is when somebody's in an acute crisis. These are places where you could bring them. Behavioral health clinics in general, inpatient psychiatric facilities. It gives information on forms. So here's the physician's emergency certificate form. Psychologists can now sign an emergency certificate. That's relatively new. That didn't exist when, well, at least back from 95 to 98 when I worked in the hospital. And the coroner's emergency certificate. And it talks about voluntary admission. People can voluntarily sign themselves into a hospital, but it also talks about non-contested admission, discharge procedures, request for release. So these are all the forms that would be used by behavioral health services. And then there's some resources here. So hospital discharge procedures, this is just one of those forms that was on that website. And it talks about how someone can leave the hospital. So if they are, if they go in voluntarily, they can leave when they want. But a person who is admitted under a formal voluntary, so informal voluntary, they have the right to treatment and they can leave when they want. But a person who's admitted under a formal voluntary admission can't be detained longer than 72 hours after they make a valid written request for discharge. So let's say I voluntarily admit myself to River Oaks, which is a psychiatric hospital in Jefferson. And then I'm like tired of being locked up. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to leave. But the staff feels like I'm a danger to myself or others. They can detain me at that point and make it involuntary and keep me for 72 hours. A non-contested admission can be made by a physician to a treatment facility to initiate some diagnostic and evaluative studies. So maybe you're not sure what's going on. You want the person to try out medication under supervision and do some diagnostic testing. Then if the person is not contesting it, they allow the doctor to admit them for this purpose. So a person who's admitted under this non-contested admission, if they tell a staff person that they want to leave, then the staff person can assist them in making that request to the director of the hospital, and then the director shall release the person within 72 hours. 72 hours is the magic number. That's 3 days. The emergency certificate is what can keep a person there against their will. And then a judicial commitment is once that emergency certificate has expired and the person, maybe they're appealing it, the judge can do a judicial commitment. So that form talks about how a person can get out once they've been put in. And let's see, this is a really interesting video. This is called The Bridge Between Suicide and Life. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I'm going to make sure y'all can hear the sound on the video. It's 14 minutes long, I think. Let's see.
I'm gonna go use the bathroom real fast.
Okay, you can take a quick break while you use the bathroom. Olivia, you need to take a break?
Yes,
All
I
right.
will as well.
All right. Y'all ready? This is pretty much the last thing we're going to do today. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Y'all were able to hear that too?
Yes.
Okay. Now it's not wanting to start. I shouldn't have messed with it. Try again.
I recently retired from the California Highway Patrol after 23 years of service. The majority of those 23 years
Uh-oh.
was spent patrolling the southern end of Marin County, which includes the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge is an iconic structure known worldwide for its beautiful views of San Francisco, the Pacific Ocean, and its inspiring architecture. Unfortunately, it is also a magnet for suicide, being one of the most utilized sites in the world. The Golden Gate Bridge opened in 1937. Joseph Strauss, chief engineer in charge of building the bridge, was quoted as saying, "The bridge is practically suicide-proof. Suicide from the bridge is neither practical nor probable. But since its opening, over 1,600 people have leapt to their death from that bridge." Some believe that traveling between the two towers will lead you to another dimension. This bridge has been romanticized as such. That the fall from that frees you from all your worries and grief, and the waters below will cleanse your soul. But let me tell you what actually occurs when the bridge is used as a means of suicide. After a free fall of 4 to 5 seconds, the body strikes the water at about 75 miles an hour. That impact shatters bones, some of which then puncture vital organs. Most die on impact. Those that don't generally flail in the water helplessly and then drown. I don't think that those who contemplate this method of suicide realize how grisly a death that they face. This is the cord. Except for around the two towers, there's 32 inches of steel paralleling the bridge. This is where most folks stand before taking their lives. I can tell you from experience that once the person is on that cord, and at their darkest time, it is very difficult to bring them back. I took this photo last year as this young woman spoke to an officer contemplating her life. I want to tell you very happily that we were successful that day in getting her back over the rail. When I first began working on the bridge, we had no formal training. You struggled to funnel your way through these calls. This was not only a disservice to those contemplating suicide, but to the officers as well. We've come a long, long way since then. Now, veteran officers and psychologists train new officers. This is Jason Garber. I met Jason on July 22nd of last year when I received a call of a possible suicidal subject sitting on the cord near mid-span. I responded, and when I arrived, I observed Jason speaking to a Golden Gate Bridge officer. Jason was just 32 years old and had flown out here from New Jersey. As a matter of fact, he had flown out here on 2 other occasions from New Jersey to attempt suicide on this bridge. After about an hour of speaking with Jason, he asked us if we knew the story of Pandora's box. Recalling your Greek mythology, Zeus created Pandora and sent her down to earth with a box and told her never, ever open that box. Well, one day, curiosity got the better of Pandora, and she did open the box. Out flew plagues, sorrows, and all sorts of evils against man. The only good thing in the box was hope. Jason then asked us, what happens when you open the box and hope isn't there? He paused a few moments, leaned to his right, and was gone. This kind, intelligent young man from New Jersey had just committed suicide. I spoke with Jason's parents that evening, and I suppose that when I was speaking with them that I didn't sound as if I was doing very well. Because that very next day, their family rabbi called to check on me. Jason's parents had asked him to do so. The collateral damage of suicide affects so many people. I pose these questions to you. What would you do if your family member, friend, or loved one was suicidal? What would you say? Would you know what to say? In my experience, it's not just the talking that you do, but the listening. Listen to understand. Don't argue, blame, or tell the person you know how they feel, because you probably don't. By just being there, you may just be the turning point that they need. If you think someone is suicidal, don't be afraid to confront them and ask the question. One way of asking them the question is like this. Others in similar circumstances have thought about ending their life. Have you had these thoughts? Confronting the person head on may just save their life and be a turning point for them. Some other signs to look for: hopelessness, believing that things are terrible and never going to get better. Helplessness, believing that there's nothing that you can do about it. Recent social withdrawal, and loss of interest in life. I came with this talk just a couple of days ago, and I received an email from a lady that I'd like to read you her letter. She lost her son on January 19th of this year. And she wrote me this email just a couple of days ago. And it's with her permission and blessing that I read this to you. Hi, Kevin. I imagine you're at the TED conference. That must be quite the experience to be there. I'm thinking I should go walk the bridge this weekend. Just wanted to drop you a note. Hope you get the word out to many people, and they go home talking about it to their friends who tell their friends, etc. I'm still pretty numb, but noticing more moments of really realizing Mike isn't coming home. Mike was driving from Petaluma to San Francisco to watch the 49er game with his father on January 19th. He never made it there. I called Petaluma police and reported him missing that evening. The next morning, 2 officers came to my home and reported that Mike's car was down at the bridge. A witness had observed him jumping off the bridge at 1:58 p.m. the previous day. Thanks so much for standing up for those who may be only temporarily too weak to stand for themselves. Who hasn't been low before without suffering from a true mental illness? It shouldn't be so easy to end it. My prayers are with you for your fight. The GGB, Golden Gate Bridge, is supposed to be a passage across our beautiful bay, not a graveyard. Good luck this week, Vicky. I can't imagine the courage it takes for her to go down to that bridge and walk the path that her son took that day. And also the courage just to carry on. I'd like to introduce you to a man I refer to as hope and courage. On March 11th of 2005, I responded to a radio call of a possible suicidal subject on the bridge sidewalk near the North Tower. I rode my motorcycle down the sidewalk and observed this man, Kevin Berthia, standing on the sidewalk. When he saw me, he immediately traversed that pedestrian rail and stood on that small pipe which goes around the tower. For the next hour and a half, I listened as Kevin spoke about his depression and hopelessness. Kevin decided on his own that day to come back over that rail and give life another chance. When Kevin came back over, I congratulated him. This is a new beginning, a new life. But I asked him, what was it that made you come back and give hope and life another chance? And you know what he told me? He said, you listened. You let me speak, and you just listened. Shortly after this incident, I received a letter from Kevin's mother, and I have that letter with me, and I'd like to read it to you. Dear Mr. Briggs, nothing will erase the events of March 11th, but you are one of the reasons Kevin is still with us. I truly believe Kevin was crying out for help. He has been diagnosed with a mental illness for which he has been properly medicated. I adopted Kevin when he was only 6 months old, completely unaware of any hereditary traits. But thank God, now we know. Kevin is straight, as he says. We truly thank God for you. Sincerely indebted to you, Narvella Berthia. And on the bottom, she writes, P.S. When I visited San Francisco General Hospital that evening, you were listed as the patient. Boy, did I have to straighten that one out. Today, Kevin is a loving father and contributing member of society. He speaks openly about the events that day and his depression in the hopes that his story will inspire others. Suicide is not just something I've encountered on the job. It's personal. My grandfather committed suicide by poisoning. That act, although ending his own pain, robbed me from ever getting to know him. This is what suicide does. For most suicidal folks, or those contemplating suicide, they wouldn't think of hurting another person. They just want their own pain to end. Typically, this is accomplished in just 3 ways: sleep, drugs or alcohol, or death. In my career, I've responded to and been involved in hundreds of mental illness and suicide calls around the bridge. Of those incidents I've been directly involved with, I've only lost 2, but that's 2 too many. One was Jason. The other was a man I spoke to for about an hour. During that time, he shook my hand on 3 occasions. On that final handshake, he looked at me and he said, Kevin, I'm sorry, but I have to go. And he left. Horrible, absolutely horrible. I do want to tell you, though, the vast majority of folks that we do get to contact on that bridge do not commit suicide. Additionally, that very few who have jumped off the bridge and lived and can talk about it, that 1% to 2%, most of those folks have said that the second that they let go of that rail, they knew that they had made a mistake and they wanted to live. I tell people the bridge not only connects Marin to San Francisco, but people together also. That connection or bridge that we make is something that each and every one of us should strive to do. Suicide is preventable. There is help. There is hope. Thank you very much.
All right. Any thoughts on that?
It's
Um,
heavy.
very profound. And I've always wondered, like people dying that way, where like it's not like a split second, it's like you're falling. If they really do, like as soon as they do it, are they thinking like, wow, I regret this, or is it like a transcending experience because you are falling from a very far height? Like I don't know. I've just always wondered that. So that's kind of cool to know.
Yeah, there's actually a guy who has survived a fall. Like he jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. And he goes out and talks because he says the minute he jumped, he prayed to God to save his life.
Mhm.
Because in that moment, he realized he made a mistake and that he didn't want to die. And as I mentioned, people with suicidal ideation so often are ambivalent, more often than not. And so there is a part of them that wants to live and they're just struggling. And it's up to us to help them identify the hope and the strength and the resources to get better. Any other thoughts, Olivia? I thought you were about to say something.
Oh, I was just saying, I mean, it was heavy, but it was also just seeing Kevin and how he's now an advocate. And there is a lot of hope, for suicide prevention. So,
Yep. Before we go, I forgot that I wanted to share just one more thing with y'all. So get rid of some of these things. So you all have access to all of this in Moodle. There's additional articles about suicide. So facing the scepter of client suicide, confronting the threat of suicide, we must do more. Counselors have a part to play in stemming U.S. suicide increase, raising awareness of suicide risk. All of those are just additional resources for you guys to explore the topic, but I was going to share, okay, so this is a presentation I recorded recently with a counselor in Oregon for new school counselors, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the process. Now, this is not research based or anything. This is currently our recommendation on how to respond when you're with a person, a client who is thinking of suicide. So the very first thing is, as has been mentioned a few times today, is always ask very directly if they are considering suicide. And I like the way he talked about it in the video, like oftentimes people in your situation think of suicide. Is that something that you are thinking of? Is it something that you've done? So that's one way that you can state that question. But the most important thing is you want to develop a connection with your client. That therapeutic alliance is more important than anything else in that moment. And so as you're connecting and developing the relationship and building your rapport, you are asking those questions that I mentioned about, have you ever attempted suicide before? Do you have a plan? Like thinking about the warning signs and identifying if they have any warning signs and if they have any risk factors. And also, what are the protective factors that they have in place in their life? And then with minors in particular, we have to communicate with parents and guardians. The only exception to that is if the parents or guardians are abusive, and that abuse in particular could be contributing to the suicidal ideation. In that case, then we are going to communicate with Child Protective Services and law enforcement, and probably not the parents, but most of the time we're going to involve parents when it's a minor. And we really try to stay away from language like your child is low risk or your child is medium risk or high risk, because we can't know that with any certainty. And I'm going to share some research with you all that shows that in just a minute. And then we're going to give parents resources so that they can get help for their minor child. And then in a school, you're going to also consult with the school administrator, but as a counselor in private practice, you're going to consult with other counselors. And then follow-up is a big thing. The research shows that follow-up phone calls are particularly helpful. for clients. But what I wanted to show y'all, let's see if I can go back. Oh, unless it's, I might have this moving forward. Yeah. So there are a number of research studies recently that have demonstrated that risk assessments, that these even ones that call themselves valid and reliable assessments, cannot predict suicidal risk. So there was a 2016 meta-analysis. So that's like where they take hundreds of studies and they look at the results of all these studies and get a combination of what did these studies find. And science could only predict future suicidal thoughts and behaviors about as well as random guessing. So a suicide expert who conducted an in-depth assessment of risk factors could predict a patient's future suicidal thoughts and behaviors with the same degree of accuracy as someone with no knowledge of the patient who predicted that based on a coin flip. And there was a 2017 research study that was also a meta-analysis. It looked at 40 years of suicide assessment research. 95% of patients assessed as high risk did not go on to complete suicide. 50% of the patient suicides assessed in the low risk category did complete suicide. And in 2018, a study of 157 patients who died by suicide found 67% of the deceased had denied having suicidal ideation during an assessment within 2 days of their death. And then there was a 2018 study that found 100% of individuals in the study who completed suicide were assessed as low risk. So I bring that to y'all's attention primarily to say that we can't predict human behavior. We can only take the information that they give us and get them put safety plans in place, contact other people to keep them safe, put measures in place, and if they're in an acute suicidal phase, get them to a hospital where they can be kept. So we don't practice without risk. Unfortunately, our profession is not risk-free. So we do the best job that we can. But if you're ever thinking that a client could be considering suicide, we want to put supports and preventions in place. And I'll show you all the one last thing that I'll show you. This is something that sort of makes me a little bit crazy as a former school counselor, but what a lot of school districts use is called the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. It's free, it's downloadable, it's available online, and it purports to be a valid and reliable instrument. But the problem is when you complete this, it's got some great questions. So ask questions 1 and 2. If both are negative, proceed to suicidal behavior section. If the answer to question 2 is yes, ask questions 3, 4, and 5. If the answer to question 1 and or 2 is yes, complete the intensity of ideation section. So the first is the wish to be dead. Have you thought about being dead or what it would be like to be dead? Have you wished you were dead? Do you wish you weren't alive anymore? Do you wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Too indirect, but that's the question on this scale. Yes or no? And then non-specific active suicidal thoughts. Have you thought about doing something to make yourself not alive anymore? Have you had any thoughts about killing yourself? Yes or no? And then you ask active suicidal ideation with any methods without intent to ask. So have you thought about how you would do that or how you would make yourself not alive anymore, or how you would kill yourself? What did you think about? And you describe what they say. Number 4 says, when you thought about making yourself not alive or killing yourself, did you think this was something you might actually do? Which is different from having thoughts, but knowing that you wouldn't do it. And then a specific plan or intent. What was your plan when you made the plan or worked out the details? Was there any part of you thinking about actually doing it? So then you ask the intensity of the ideation. So how many times have you had the thoughts, and If they've actually attempted, you put that information down. If it was an interrupted attempt, an aborted attempt, preparatory acts or behaviors. So you answer all these questions and get to the lethality part. And actually, this one doesn't show the, maybe it's on here. At the end, when you're scoring the assessment, and there's a few different versions of it. There's a version for school, there's a version for community mental health. There's an adult version and a student version, but when you get to scoring it, it will give you low, medium, or high. Let's see. This one's a little bit easier. So, in the past month, have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? Have you actually had thoughts about killing yourself? And then it says high risk if they answer those questions. And so what we're telling school counselors right now is not to tell a parent their child is low, medium, or high risk. You're just going to tell the parent their child is at risk. And here's what you need to do. You need to take them to the hospital, or you need to get them some mental health counseling, or you need to, here's some hotline numbers, make sure the guns are locked away, all of those kind of protective things. So we're just about out of time. Any last questions, thoughts?
I did. When you say reading assignments before class, there's no actual assignment attached, it's just to read it and be prepared for discussion during class.
Right.
Okay, just
Yeah.
make sure.
Except for, don't forget on Tuesday that for assignment number 1
Right.
is due. Yeah.
Right. Okay, awesome.
Any questions or concerns about the days that we won't be meeting in person because of my absence? No.
It'll just be a link in Moodle. Okay.
Yeah. I'll probably get that set up over the weekend, and then we can review it on Monday or Wednesday. I mean, Tuesday or Thursday.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you all for agreeing to meet on Zoom today. I look forward to seeing y'all in class next week in Whitehall.
Thank you.
Good luck with your procedure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. See y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye.